Dear colleagues, I'm going to show you a few tricks with the Primescan and the Axioprisa facebow, because I keep hearing that my colleagues are having difficulties. To be honest, the Primescan is not ideally designed for scanning this part. These are two different manufacturers, and each scanner has its own peculiarities with AI and tooth recognition, and the Primescan unfortunately has some special difficulties with it. But there are workarounds for getting it to work well anyway. And I'll now explain the three things that are important here. The Axioprisa is a digital transfer bow with which we can use the scanner to match the upper jaw in relation to the skull. So here we have a nice patient and her corresponding upper jaw scan. Similar to the analog facebow, which is also applied to the upper jaw, this is also matched with the upper jaw. So we need a scan of the upper jaw here. And for the Axioprisa, we create another maxillary scan. I always take a biocopy of the maxilla. This could also be one of the other maxillary catalogs. I always like to have the patients inserted into the ear canals themselves. Please take the two corners here on the left and right with your thumb and index fingers and put it in your ears so that it is well inserted. Please lean back your head. And leave your fingers on, then it will hold a little better. The glabella support is placed here at the front. And with this, the bow is actually already in place if you support it a little. Both screws must be loosened by the assistant so that it can be adjusted. And then I insert this up here. Have you pushed it together properly? Push it in properly. You can't hear me very well. I have to speak louder. A little bit together. I'll tighten it here. I'll turn it a little tighter again. I always prefer to do it myself. The first amount is discarded. It's not really mixed yet. And let's put some material on the inside of this yellow stick and insert it here so that the teeth bite in. And then I close it here. Then I use fast because it simply sets the quickest. I prefer to scan so that I'm standing in front of the patient also in general. So I can look at the patient here and at my monitor at the same time. When I'm scanning, I hold it down here with my finger, because we've seen that the bow also likes to tilt down slightly. And the assistant first retracts one side for me. And now I scan the upper jaw again. Just occlusal to the first molar, also a little buccal. It's really easy. Palatal is often a bit more difficult, but I make sure that I avoid any gaps on the screen. And that I can make a connection here where the pink material is, that this becomes one surface. Now the assistant changes. I don't actually want both sides to be held at the same time. The danger is that you bump into the bow here and it is wiggling around somewhere. That's why it's easier for me to do one side first, then the other. And then the same here. Occlusal, palatal, buccal. And here again, make sure that there is a connection to the yellow part, that it is not disconnected. It has to be one data set at the end. And now we can see that the system has already matched. So I've scanned enough of the upper jaw because it has matched that with the upper jaw. And I'm now only scanning here the yellow object and can now remove the arch. I don't have to scan all the way to the front, which is much more unstable and laborious. Instead, you can take it out of the ears. You can take it out. I'll take it off carefully. Pull it out. Tighten it again to be on the safe side. And now I take hold of the bow so that I have both my fingers on it. Oh, and I've already made a few extra grooves here so that it's a bit easier for the system to scan all the way to the back. I don't have to scan this whole area on the patient, I can also scan it in my hand. Now you make sure that the fingers don't move in the meantime. If they were to move here, then of course you would have double surfaces. I just hold on tight here. And the only thing that matters is that you get to these 3 points. Everything else here is not important. In the end, the system only matches these 3 points. Nevertheless, I make sure that I can also scan the sites a bit, that this is not just a flat object. And so that there are no gaps here either, but that there is also a connection. There is a fine gap here, and I have sometimes seen that in the scan there is also a gap sometimes. So this must be one object. This completes the scan of the bow. Now we have to do a little more work here. First, it is important that everything that is under the yellow part here, because you should make sure that you don't scan down there. He tries to make a model, and it's hard to make a model if there are 2 surfaces on top of each other. So I have to cut this out with the cutting tool. I cut there under it, also from here. Und auch von hier. And it's generally always better with scanners if you cut away any irregular, disconnected surfaces. Something like this is just a disruptive factor. None of this is helpful. Movable mucous membrane, which perhaps also creates double contours. Now we have to make sure that it actually matches the upper jaw. That's always difficult to scan there so that the connection is there. Ideally, it is already matched in the prime scan. So, he's done it now. If he hadn't made it, it wouldn't have mattered. You could have gone on to the next phase. Match it manually with 3 points. In the lab, the software can also match it again. Thus, it is possible to get to this geometry with the prime scan. The next hurdle that still needs to be overcome is whether it manages to generate this model. Unfortunately, this is something that doesn't always work. That's why you have to let patients sit until you can see that he has calculated it. Because this is where it sometimes breaks off. This has to do with the fact that there are areas under the yellow part. Or there are holes somewhere. I haven't quite figured it out yet. This is internal to Sirona, what it wants or needs in order to make a model out of it. In the end, you always get it right somehow. But you can also see that it's not necessarily quicker than putting on the physical facebow and sending it to the laboratory. That's why I would also like Sirona to help a little here and see if they can perhaps provide information at this stage as to why this is happening. It has now worked here. I would say that it works in 8 out of 10 cases. And here, there's nothing to worry about now. He has calculated it completely. Now he's already defining the model axis. And then it's simply uploaded to the lab as it is. and the technician can articulate it virtually. So we can view the scan here as well. Anschauen here. I hope that helps you. And write a few letters to Sirona to ask them to help us make something like this work. It's not an impression machine, it's a digitization interface, and we want to be as flexible as possible so that we can also carry out cranial transfers.